Imagine a man so cunning he managed to escape from prison not once, but twice. A man who left behind wounded guards, terrified hostages, a hijacked airplane, and a trail of chaos across the American South. His name is Larry Porter Chism, and for more than 4 decades, he has been a ghost. One of America's most wanted fugitives, a man who simply vanished into the shadows, leaving law enforcement chasing whispers and shadows. Was he a criminal mastermind? Or just a desperate man lucky enough to slip through the cracks of a flawed system? Tonight, we unravel the extraordinary life, daring escapes, and chilling disappearance of the man the U.S. Marshals Service still calls one of its most wanted fugitives. This is the story of Larry Porter Chism. Larry Porter Chism was born on December 19, 1948, in Forest City, Arkansas. His family name was respected in the community. His maternal grandfather, John Rosamond Jack Porter, had served as mayor. On the surface, the Chisms appeared to be the picture of Southern respectability. Hard-working, church-going, a family with deep roots in the region. Larry grew up in what seemed to be an ordinary childhood. Friends remembered him as polite, soft-spoken, even bookish. He joined the Glee Club, the Latin Club, and several student organizations. By all appearances, he was a young man destined for a bright future, not a life of crime. But under the surface, there were hints of something different about Larry. He wasn't just smart, he was clever, sharp-minded, restless. Unlike many of his peers, he wasn't content with small-town ambitions. He wanted more. More excitement, more money, more control. When Larry enrolled at Memphis State University, now the University of Memphis, those ambitions grew. He was drawn not only to academics, but to the darker undercurrents of student life in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the era of counterculture, rebellion, and experimentation. What began as curiosity would soon escalate into full-fledged criminal enterprise. At Memphis State, Larry studied law, an ironic choice for someone who would later dedicate his life to breaking it. Those who knew him described him as intelligent, articulate, and quick-witted, traits that could have made him a successful attorney or public servant. Instead, Larry used his skills for something else entirely. Behind the neat facade of a college student, he was quietly building what authorities would later describe as a heroin trafficking network. He recruited fellow students as couriers, sending them across the border into Mexico to smuggle heroin back into the United States. To law enforcement, this was shocking. To his peers, it was inconceivable. The clean-cut young man from Arkansas was, in fact, orchestrating a dangerous international drug pipeline. But Larry's ambitions didn't stop there. He was bold, reckless, and fearless. When he wasn't moving heroin, he was turning to armed robbery. Investigators would later allege that he and his crew were responsible for a series of robberies across the South, using violence and intimidation to finance their growing criminal network. It was only a matter of time before the law caught up with him. In 1974, Larry was arrested and convicted on multiple charges, including armed robbery and heroin distribution. The sentence was harsh, 40 years in state prison. For most men, this would have been the end of the story. Decades behind bars, another inmate swallowed by the system. But Larry Porter Chism was not most men. Behind prison walls, he became something of a paradox. Guards described him as respectful, even cooperative. Other inmates saw him as a diplomat, someone who could defuse conflicts and negotiate peace in the tense, volatile world of prison life. He wrote for the prison newspaper. He kept his head down. He played the part of a model prisoner. Yet beneath that calm exterior, Larry was planning, watching, waiting, because Larry Chism had no intention of serving out his sentence. In September of 1978, after just 4 years behind bars, Larry would execute one of the most daring prison escapes in American history. It began in the most unlikely of places, a bowling alley. And by the end of that night, there would be hostages, a hijacked airplane, and blood spilled on both sides. This was no ordinary escape. This was the moment Larry Chism became a legend. On the evening of September 13, 1978, the citizens of Dixon, Tennessee, could never have imagined that their quiet town would become the stage for a drama straight out of a Hollywood film. That night, 4 prisoners from the Tennessee State Prison were taken on a supervised outing to the Bowl Arena, a popular local bowling alley. Among them was one man whose name would soon be burned into history, Porter Chism. Prison outings weren't unusual at the time. As part of rehabilitation programs, certain inmates were occasionally allowed supervised trips into the community. For guards, these events were routine. For inmates, they were moments of fresh air, a break from the steel bars and cement walls of prison life. But for Larry, this was something else entirely. Unknown to the guards, Chism had orchestrated an elaborate plan. Hidden in the men's restroom was a sawed-off shotgun, planted there ahead of time by accomplices on the outside. The bowling alley wasn't just an outing. It was the stage for his escape. As the inmates bowled and the guards kept casual watch, Larry slipped into the restroom with another prisoner. Moments later, one of the guards followed them inside, perhaps suspecting something unusual. It was then that Chism made his move. When the guard stepped through the door, Chism turned, weapon in hand. The sawed-off shotgun gleamed under the fluorescent lights. What happened next was chaos. A shotgun blast echoed through the small restroom. The guard went down wounded, but the noise had drawn attention. Within seconds, another officer rushed in, and another gunfight broke out. Bullets ricocheted off the tiled walls. In the chaos, Larry himself was shot through the hand, but he didn't stop. Adrenaline kept him moving. Blood was everywhere. The other inmates grabbed the weapon, and together they stormed out of the restroom, taking control of the situation. Patrons screamed. Bowling balls crashed to the floor. A young woman working at the alley was seized and taken hostage. The escape was officially underway. Chism and his fellow inmates fled into the night, dragging their hostage with them. They ran to the parking lot, where they carjacked a vehicle, forcing the driver at gunpoint to take them out of town. The wounded guard lay bleeding behind them, and police radios across Dixon crackled to life. But Larry wasn't satisfied with just a stolen car. He had something bigger in mind. Hours later, under the cover of darkness, the fugitives reached a small airfield. There, they forced a pilot to take them aboard a small plane. With their hostage still in tow, they ordered him to fly them toward Arkansas. This wasn't just a prison escape. It was now a full-scale hijacking. As the plane roared into the night sky, panic gripped the hostage and the pilot. Any wrong move could be fatal. Larry, bleeding from his hand but still in control, barked orders, his shotgun never wavering. But fate, it seemed, was not entirely on his side. The plane developed mechanical problems mid-flight, forcing the pilot to make an emergency landing in Marianna, Arkansas. It was a moment of vulnerability. A hijacked plane sitting on the ground, fugitives trapped between capture and freedom. And yet, somehow, Larry managed to slip away once again. Authorities swarmed the area. Police cars sped down dirt roads, sirens wailing. Spotlights cut through the night. In the confusion, the fugitives split up. For hours, the countryside was alive with gunfire and chaos. At one point, Chism exchanged shots with officers during a chase through the woods. His hand was bleeding heavily, but he refused to give up. By dawn, 3 of the fugitives had been captured. The hostage was rescued, shaken but alive. But Larry? He remained on the run. It took days before police finally tracked him down. Surrounded, injured, and out of options, Larry was taken back into custody. The legend of his escape had already begun to spread. Newspapers ran headlines calling it one of the most daring jailbreaks in modern history. For most fugitives, this would have been the end of the line. But not for Larry Porter Chism. Chism was returned to custody, this time under much stricter security. The authorities believed they had finally stopped him. He had pulled off the impossible, an escape from a bowling alley that escalated into a hostage-taking, a carjacking, and a hijacked airplane. And yet, despite all that, he was alive. The courts were preparing new charges: armed escape, kidnapping, hijacking, attempted murder. His sentence would grow longer, his punishment harsher. But Larry wasn't done. Even as he sat in jail, his mind was already at work. The bowling alley escape had been bold, but his next escape would be the one that made him a ghost. Just 3 months later, in December of 1978, Larry Chism would make his second escape. But this time, it wouldn't end with him in handcuffs. This time, he would vanish. Not for days, not for weeks, but for decades. The question is, how did he do it? And how has he managed to stay hidden for more than 40 years? After the chaos of the bowling alley escape, Larry Porter Chism was back in custody. This time, authorities were certain they had him secured. He was wounded, facing a mountain of new charges: kidnapping, hijacking, attempted murder. The courts prepared to lock him away for the rest of his life. But history was about to repeat itself. And this time, Larry wasn't planning to return. Larry was being held at the Lonoke County Jail in Arkansas. Unlike the high walls and guard towers of a state penitentiary, the Lonoke jail was smaller, less fortified, a county facility designed for short-term inmates and transfers. It wasn't built to contain someone like Chism. On the night of December 21st, 1978, as Christmas lights twinkled across town, Larry and several accomplices inside the jail put into motion a plan that had been carefully prepared. Using a smuggled wrench, they dismantled parts of the air conditioning system, crawling into the ductwork like characters in a heist movie. From there, they gained access to the jail's internal structure, locating the keys they needed. Once armed with the keys, they overpowered a guard, locked him inside a cell, and slipped out into the night. Outside, the December air was sharp and biting. Chism and his fellow escapees moved quickly, stealing a vehicle parked nearby. Sirens hadn't yet sounded. For the second time in just 3 months, Larry Chism was free. But unlike the bowling alley escape, this time there would be no shootout, no hostages, no hijacked airplane. This time, when Larry Porter Chism walked out of that jail, he disappeared. And for more than 40 years, no one has ever been able to find him. At first, law enforcement responded with urgency. Roadblocks were set up. Officers combed the countryside. Helicopters circled overhead. The other escapees were captured one by one, dragged back into custody. But Chism? He was nowhere to be found. It was as if the ground had swallowed him whole. Within days, the U.S. Marshals Service placed him on its 15 most wanted fugitives list. Posters bearing his photo were plastered across Arkansas, Tennessee, and beyond. His face appeared on television news bulletins. Rewards were offered, but every lead ended in disappointment. Over the next few years, stories began to surface. A man resembling Larry was seen in Louisiana, working odd jobs under an assumed name. Another report placed him in Alabama, blending into a small community. Then came rumors of a man in Cincinnati, Ohio, suspected of carrying out a brazen bank robbery in which more than $250,000 was stolen. Did Larry Chism resurface in Cincinnati to pull off one of the slickest, non-violent bank robberies of the decade? Or was it just another ghost story, another rumor in a trail filled with dead ends? Some investigators believed it was him. The robbery bore his trademark: bold, calculated, and executed with chilling precision. But no arrest was ever made. Chism was no ordinary fugitive. He was a master manipulator, a man who understood both law and crime. He reportedly carried false identification, forged documents, and assumed multiple aliases. Among the names he allegedly used were Kenneth Brookins and Jack Kaufman. Unlike other fugitives who relied on brute force or reckless violence, Larry relied on cunning. He knew how to blend in, how to become invisible. He didn't crave attention. He didn't flaunt wealth. Instead, he lived in the shadows, making himself forgettable. The last solid lead came in Atlanta, Georgia, in December of 1990. Authorities believe Larry, using an alias, sold a vehicle there. The trail, already faint, grew cold after that. Think about that. For over 12 years after his escape, Larry Porter Chism was still moving, still working, still breathing the same air as his pursuers. And yet, somehow, he managed to stay one step ahead. After 1990, he simply vanished into history. The U.S. Marshals have never closed the case. Decades later, they still list him on their most wanted roster. His wanted poster remains active, a $25,000 reward dangling like bait for anyone who can help capture him. Charges still hang over his head. Escape, racketeering, kidnapping, airplane hijacking, narcotics trafficking, murder and firearms charges. For investigators, the mystery is maddening. How does a man escape twice, elude capture for 40 years, and remain invisible in the modern world of surveillance, databases, and digital footprints? Did Larry Chism flee the country, starting a new life abroad under a different name? Did he live quietly in some small American town, his neighbors never knowing who he really was? Or did his story end long ago, his body buried in an unmarked grave, his secrets never revealed? When Larry Chism slipped out of Lonoke County Jail in December 1978, he didn't just break free from prison walls. He broke into the imagination of law enforcement across America. From that moment on, every sheriff, every FBI agent, every U.S. Marshal had one question: where did he go? The manhunt was relentless in the early years. Roadblocks were set up within hours. Officers searched every farmhouse, every barn, every back road across Arkansas and Tennessee. But Chism was gone. By 1979, the U.S. Marshals had declared Chism one of their 15 most wanted fugitives. His face appeared on wanted posters, newspapers, and television programs. Law enforcement was certain it was only a matter of time before he slipped up. And yet he didn't. Rumors flowed in from across the South. In Louisiana, someone reported a man resembling Chism working under the table at a shipping yard. In Mississippi, there was a sighting at a diner. In Florida, a tip suggested he was hiding with drug traffickers. But each time agents arrived, the lead was already cold. Chism seemed to have a talent for disappearing, just as the law closed in. Like smoke, he slipped through their fingers. One of the most intriguing episodes came in the early 1980s. A bank in Cincinnati, Ohio, was robbed of nearly $250,000 in cash. Witnesses described a calm, composed man who walked in, demanded the money, and left without firing a shot. Investigators later whispered, the man matched the description of Larry Porter Chism. No weapon brandished. No chaos. Just quiet control. It was bold. It was efficient. And it fit Larry's profile perfectly. But without hard evidence, the theory remained just that, a theory. Throughout the 1980s, investigators chased rumors of Chism living in small towns across the South. Some claimed he fathered children under a new name. Others swore he had joined organized crime networks. A few even suggested he fled to Mexico, using his old drug connections to vanish abroad. Then came 1990, the last solid lead. In Atlanta, a man believed to be Chism sold a vehicle under an alias. Authorities traced the transaction, but by the time they closed in, the man was gone. And after that, nothing. We had his face on every wall. His name was in every briefing. We get tips constantly, but every time we followed up, it was too late. Chism wasn't just lucky. He was smart. He understood how he worked. And so, the hunt dragged on. Weeks became months. Months became years. And years turned into decades. By the 2000s, Chism's name was rarely mentioned in the press, but among U.S. Marshals, his file remained active. A man who had embarrassed law enforcement not once, but twice still loomed as unfinished business. In the digital age, authorities hoped technology would do what human detectives had not. Facial recognition software, databases of aliases, advanced background checks. But still, no confirmed trace. As of today, Larry Porter Chism remains at large. Wanted, uncaptured, a ghost. Some investigators believe Larry Chism never left the United States. Instead, they argue he reinvented himself. New name, new job, a modest home in a small town where nobody asked too many questions. Imagine the irony that for 40 years, America's most wanted fugitive might have been living quietly in plain sight. A neighbor, a co-worker, the man who bagged your groceries. Would you even recognize him today? Others argue he returned to crime. The alleged Cincinnati bank robbery is cited as proof. Perhaps he tapped into his old heroin trafficking network. Perhaps he used forged documents to travel internationally. But if he did so with remarkable stealth. Unlike other fugitives, there are no fingerprints, no bank accounts, no family ties pulling him into the open. Another chilling possibility. Chism may have died years ago. Without ID, without fingerprints, a body could have gone unclaimed, buried in a potter's field. If that's true, the manhunt is chasing a ghost that no longer exists. But until there is proof, a body, a DNA match, a confession, the file will remain open. Larry Chism's story isn't just about one man. It's about the flaws of the system. The bowling alley escape exposed vulnerabilities in prison supervision. The Lone Oak jail breakout highlighted the dangers of underestimating a determined inmate. His ability to disappear for decades raises questions about identity, law enforcement, and the thin line between control and chaos. Some call him a genius. Others call him a coward. But one thing is certain. Larry Porter Chism has secured his place in American criminal folklore. He is the escape artist who beat the system. Twice. 40 years. 2 escapes. Countless manhunts. And still, no capture. Tonight, as you watch this documentary, one question remains unanswered. Where is Larry Porter Chism? And perhaps the real question is, could he be closer than you think?